So Jim, first, thanks again for taking the time. And could you say a few words about you and the kind of roles that you've exercised?
Oh, okay. I'll go way back only because it provides context, but I was a mathematics major in university. And when I graduated from university here in California, I received a fellowship at UC Berkeley to get a PhD in statistics. And that was what I was going to do. I was going to be a statistician, and I was going to teach statistics, and I was going to do research. And then at the very last minute, I thought, hey, what kind of job am I going to get? And instead, at the last minute, I switched, and I got a master's degree in engineering from Stanford, and then we started work here in Silicon Valley. And shortly thereafter, I got an MBA and majored largely in accounting. And my first couple of assignments in the real world, my first real job where I got real money, was as an accountant. And I didn't care for it much, but that was just simply what I thought I was supposed to do. And I got into high technology as an accountant, and was accounting for manufacturing operations. And I got sucked into manufacturing, logistics, distribution, and it really hit a nice chord in me. And here in America in the 1980s, manufacturing started going away. It all went offshore, went to Mexico, went to the Far East, China, the Philippines, and I found I was on an airplane all the time, and I really didn't like that. I had a young family, and I was on the road constantly. It was a miserable deal. And so I decided to go back, retrain myself, and I got a master's degree in computer science. And I made the switch over to IT, information technology. And then from there, you move up the food chain. I've been the chief information officer at Symantec. Symantec, I think, is no longer, somebody acquired Symantec, but I was also the chief information officer and VP of operations at Electronic Arts. I don't know if Electronic Arts is big in Europe. Madden football is big in America.
Yeah, it is true.
Okay, so
the FIFA game or something. The FIFA.
Let's put it this way: Electronic Arts was probably the very first big successful video game company, and now there's a huge industry. And EA was kind of at the start of that. And then I also worked as the chief information officer and chief technology officer for both VMware. VMware, of course, is a global brand, and at a startup called Dendrion. I'll probably tell some stories about Dendrion, but the key to this story is that I went from accountant to manufacturing to technology. And I did that in response to how the business environment changed. So I had to keep reinventing myself. And your students will have to do the same thing. In the course of their careers, they're going to start in one area and they're going to move into something else. And if they don't make that change, their career will end, actually. Because the environment changes in a way that you either change with it or you go out and sell real estate or something like that. So I'm hoping that your students see that evolution as being a useful model for their own efforts to learn their entire life. They need to keep themselves as learning, growing individuals, and looking at how they change, how they add value in the businesses going forward.
Wonderful. So you've gone to the top of the chain, in terms of those tech and biotech companies in the Silicon Valley. And of course, Silicon Valley is world famous for its ability to innovate. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on the secret recipe of Silicon Valley to do that successfully, to innovate at scale successfully.
I realized in my own background that almost every company I've ever been with has either been acquired or has gone out of business. And you go, wow, okay, now that is a real interesting thing. And it's like, what in common? What caused all these companies to lose control of their own destiny? What caused them to go out of business? And generally was the inability to come up with new and innovative products. In other words, the innovation process was broken at each and every one of these companies, and they were outcompeted. They simply could not come up with the next generation, and they were gone. And so the innovation here in Silicon Valley gets a lot of attention. There's a couple of wonderful authors that are worth your students and participants in your program. There's several by the author Steven Johnson. It talks about innovation and talks about technology over the life of the Industrial Revolution. Sure, there's the obvious ones like the steam engine and supermarket scanners, laser scanners. You can think of hundreds of innovative products that have had a big impact on the world economy. But more so than just the individual stories that each of those products have, it's the process of innovation. And around here in Silicon Valley, that is a big deal with all senior management. How do you keep that innovative energy, that creative desire? How do you keep that going, and how do you translate that into financial success for your firm?
In terms of pattern recognition, what do you think are the key ingredients for innovation to work?
In almost every circumstance, you start with a problem, and you start with somebody who is passionate to address that problem, resolve the problem. So, Stephane, from a point of view of where you and I were working together shoulder to shoulder, in the finance industry and at Lorien Ward, the Lorien Ward's competitors were automating and using artificial intelligence and coming up with interesting and compelling desktop and app-oriented, gamified ways of interacting with their customer. And our company was not doing that. And I found that very frustrating, and I was going around talking to people saying, hey, our competitors, hey, look at this cool tool from, XYZ company. And people sort of shrugged their shoulders. There was nobody within our organization that shared my passion. There's nobody who was in a position to want to change anything other than about the way we were doing business. Does this resonate with you, Stephane? Does this sound familiar?
Yes, absolutely.
And I was surprised. I was horrified. And but we needed, the company needed somebody who is in a position of concern about our product, our service, and that others were outflanking us, and that we were going to be in a compromised, competitive position in the absence of some good technology. But there was nobody to do that. And so to your question, that to see real innovation happen inside an organization, you need a champion, somebody who has got strong ownership. It doesn't have to be the CEO, and it doesn't even have to be an executive, but the executives have to share the vision of whoever it is that does step up, and then you would have a technology partner. I'm actually better as a partner to an impassioned leader. I'm a better partner, and it's that partnership that then a miracle occurs, and the new technology takes place, and the customers' lives are changed, and the business has changed fundamentally, usually with an introduction of new technology like that.
And you know what I like about your answer as well, that you already hinted at earlier, it comes down to individuals.
Yes, yes.
That whole innovation comes down to decisions, to individuals, right, to the passion, to the vision.
Yes, yes. Well, in the absence of a strong owner, somebody who's interested passionately to solve a problem, nothing's going to happen. And usually it's not, you can empower somebody and say that they are the chief innovation officer, or they could be the chief digital officer, or the chief transformation officer. You can empower somebody like that. But if they are really just simply technologists, then they have to find a partner within the business. They have to find somebody that says, gee, if we had something like this, we would go out and crush the competition. And so really it is a partnership. You can't do it alone. You can't do it by yourself. You can't just go out and hire some engineers to start grokking around trying to fix things. You need a vision and a partner and somebody who's going to drive things forward.
Is that I can see what you are saying in some of those household stories, well known, of Facebook, and having a visionary who invents something that solves, student college questions, or Google, or finding information, and how they were passionate about that problem and started with that, and then build a company around it. And so I was wondering how, as a partner, do you make yourself valuable to those visionaries that you may find and want to support when they have a real vision, a real innovation they want to bring to market?
What a good innovation partner would do, what a mature technologist would do, is help take somebody who has an impassioned vision that cannot be executed, and give them some grounding, give them some capability to, hey, only this is possible. Now, here's a story. It's not my story, but it's a story about Steve Jobs. They said Steve Jobs' biggest attribute, his real skill in business, was to envision products that did not exist, at least not at the moment, but they clearly had all the technical prerequisites available. That it's like, well, gee, if we take these things and put them together, and then this is something everybody wants. So Apple Music or an iPod, all the technology, all the circuitry, all the battery technology, all the audio technology, all of that all existed. Somebody just had to pull it all together. And they said Jobs was excellent at doing that, envisioning things that didn't exist, but which was available. It was not unknown science. And there are many companies here in Silicon Valley that have stretched the bridge too far. You may have heard in Europe of the scandal here, local scandal with Elizabeth Holmes. Does that name ring a bell?
Yes, yes, yes.
And so, local girl, right down, I live about 2 miles away from Stanford University. Elizabeth Holmes was a Stanford University student, and she envisioned something that if she could have done it, it would have been a stunning achievement and a stunning advancement for health and health diagnostics. The problem was, it wasn't possible. It was impossible. And she didn't have anybody there to gently guide her through the science and say, you can't get that much information out of one drop of blood. You can't get that much information out of a vial of blood. And trying to bring a wild-eyed visionary back into reality, I think that's the real role of a good senior technology individual is keep them in the realm of what's possible. Elizabeth Holmes, couldn't achieve that vision. Nobody told her she couldn't. She ended up resorting to lying about it, and she hurt a whole bunch of people, and of course lost $900 million of investor money needlessly. So this was a real tragedy, but she didn't have a good partner. She didn't have somebody that could help her realize at least a portion of her dreams.
You've been rubbing elbows with some of those household names, leaders of large companies. And I was wondering whether in that process, anything struck you about their personality, about how they are as humans, that may not be obvious to the common mortals we are.
Do you know who invented Ethernet? Does that ring a bell?
The technology, yes. I don't know who invented it.
The guy that invented the technology is a guy named Robert Metcalfe.
Yes.
And
okay.
Metcalfe worked up here at, and you can look him up, and your students, of course, can look Metcalfe. I worked directly for Bob Metcalfe, the inventor of Ethernet. He had dozens of patents, and he was a PhD from MIT with a background in electrical engineering. He was a pretty good mathematician. He had a number of skills. He was absolutely a god-awful manager. He was manipulative. He was disorganized. What he really was a self-promoter. And so we worked at a company together that he founded. The company was 3Com. I don't know if 3Com was ever, okay. 3Com was, in its day, was one of the biggest and best known networking brands in the world. And Metcalfe was executive VP. I worked for Bob, and he was a lousy visionary. He was a terrible manager. He was disorganized. It's funny. He told great stories, but he couldn't get anything done. And they finally had to fire him from his own company. The cautionary tale here is that somebody can come up with a really innovative solution. Somebody can come up with something that really hits the mark as a wonderful product or service and a new technology, and they're hailed as visionaries, but they very generally can't actually pull that through. They can't take that to the next iteration. It is not really in their skill set. And Silicon Valley is littered with dozens and dozens of people who came up with a great idea, brought it public, and they became billionaires, and then they crashed it into back to earth, or that they couldn't come up with another set of new and fun and innovative ideas. So as your question is, who have I worked for? Who have I rubbed shoulders with? We've got dozens of characters, but the story is generally the same. They had a great first hit, and they couldn't follow it up. It happens over and over again. The only exception to that, kid you not, Steve Jobs.
Because you had the Apple II, and then you had the iPod, and then you had the iPhone. So yeah.
Well, that's right. It went from the Macintosh,
yeah.
and then Apple, of course, at one time almost went out of business. And as I said, Stanford University is 2 miles to the north of me. Apple's gigantic Infinity headquarters is 2 miles to the south of me. And watching Apple over the years go from big success to almost abject failure, almost out of business, back to the global success it has today, is because they've been able to come up with product after product after product, right thing at the right place at the right time. They've been really very clever about that. Now, another company that has that good innovative track record is Cisco. When I was at 3Com, Bob Metcalfe and I, and a group of one lawyer and one other executive, sat in a room and watched a demo from a husband and wife team showing us this new thing called a router. And, we looked at it, we talked about it, they gave their presentation, and we decided to take a pass on it. And so they shrugged their shoulders, they went down the road and they got some venture capital. And this was the husband and wife team that invented, that were the founders of Cisco. We took a pass on Cisco's prime product, and you should have heard the criticisms. They made no sense to me. It was like, I thought, hey, this is a great addition. This is the next level up in the networking world. This is going to be huge. Nah, pass. We're not going to do that. And 3Com, of course, went out of business 2 years later, and Cisco exploded into what it is today. And I'm thinking, and I've thought about this as far as 3Com is concerned. I think part of the reason that people took a pass on this beautiful product and this wonderful opportunity, they were looking to sell the company for a song. And I think the deal is because it wasn't invented here. We didn't think of it. It's like we have to put our own 3Com stamp on things. And they just, like I said, they just shrugged their shoulders and went out, got some capital, and went to work competing against us and crushed us right out of the market.
So, Jim, what comes across to me is the mix in you of cognitive processes, approaches, and emotionality. You seem very passionate, maybe even emotional. So my question is, are you very much aware of your own feelings, your own emotions? Are you aware?
The answer is yes, and that's a heck of an observation, by the way. If you look at the model for most Silicon Valley engineers, and I'm sure this is true in Europe or any place where there's innovation underway, many engineers are very controlled. They live in a world of science and technology. There's a certain dispassion that they're just simply working with equations or with physical or virtual reality. And there's, I don't want to say it's devoid of emotion, but it is not where they, it's not where they work. But in my world, and what you've noticed in me, is to get resources and to get, to make progress and to implement some of the ideas of our best engineers and scientists, you need passion. Mm-hmm. You think of somebody leading men into battle in a war. What could you say to somebody who's there's a prospect that they might die? Well, the leader, if it's a general or a colonel or whatever, has to speak with some motivating passion. Mm-hmm. They have to. There's a certain charismatic element that is required, and so the best generals, the best political leaders, are the ones that are able to take a combination of the intellectual or the engineering part, the get it done part, the tactical, and they can combine that with a measure of passion. And so on. And so, Stephane, about storytelling, I have used storytelling as a leader for years and years because people can relate to stories. Just as a species, we relate to myths, and a passionate story with a good punchline of redemption or achievement or whatever you've saved the maiden, you've saved the damsel, you've done. Or you've accomplished, big things. Those stories are what cause people to resonate and cooperate and pull in the same direction to achieve the things that need to be done. And as you noticed, as you've mentioned, I do have a passionate element, but in the end, I'm really just a mathematician. And,
yeah, but that's interesting that you have both capacities: the cognitive, the high level of cognitive intelligence, and what I'm thinking of is. The additional part of our brain activity is the emotional intelligence. And I can see definitely your high level of passion. I'm still curious, Are you so much aware of your own emotions that you discover them as they happen and then figure out what is the next clever move? Or are you more kind of being in a passionate mode?
Yeah, indeed. And that's a great question. I don't know that in the moment I'm all that aware. At this, I'm in my 70s now. And, so I've kind of grooved my path, or the mold is pretty well set. And so when I speak as I do, or when I'm looking to influence somebody, I'm hardly aware of it anymore because it's so automatic.
Yeah.
And if I took a moment to be more aware, I could maybe channel that energy to maybe even a higher level, or
Yeah,
to
but
even.
If you looked at yourself from the outside perspective, you described such an interesting and challenging and inspiring career path and creating very strong results. If you wanted to change something, what would that be? What would you like to do differently?
Wow. This is a topic or a question that I have asked myself hundreds of times. It's, so it really cuts to the heart of kind of the private conversations that we have with ourselves. And I have never settled on a good or a satisfactory answer. I can say that if I go all the way back to school, I might have spent less time on mathematics and less time on engineering, and I would have spent more time being a speaker, developing my public speaking skills. I would have been on a debate team, and I'm not saying I would have been any good at it, but I would have looked to be a better communicator, better speaker in public.
What would have been different in your career if you had done that?
Well, I don't know that the career difference would have been all that great in the sense that I still had, in terms of career goals, in terms of progress, financially, organizationally, I was in the room, I was at the table when lots of big decisions were made at several big companies,
Yes.
things that had high impact. And
Yes.
I would have never envisioned that would have happened when I was in MBA school. I just wanted a job when I went to MBA school. I need a salary, and I didn't think of what I was trying to achieve. But in the end, so at Electronic Arts, I had probably about 2,200 people working for me. That doesn't mean anything, but it's just different than I would have anticipated for myself. And being a better speaker, being a more charismatic or effective public speaker, I don't know that it would have changed any of the where I ended up organizationally or financially or anything like that. But I would have been more influential, and I think that's the key. I've mentioned this in people that I've mentored over the years, that you start out in an organization and you're just there to contribute and do work. But as you climb the ranks, you're really, the organization is looking for you to be more influential, a better negotiator, a more charismatic leader. And I think that more energy on public speaking.
I'm surprised that you talk about being a better speaker. I have seldom listened to a more well-articulated and inspiring speaker than you in this room. So being a better speaker, are you sure, are you certain it is about being a better speaker? Or might it have something to do with being more pushy in the right moments?
Pushy people seem to not get the, pushy people end up being not influential. It's the people who, and I'm talking about influence. I was, in fairness, you're right. I think I was influential enough. Otherwise, I would not have
Sure.
I would not have been hired. I would not have been kept on board in these senior positions if I wasn't able to influence others. But I'm thinking of all the times I could have been more effective, and that comes only from practice.
Yes.
And if I practiced earlier, if I had, as a young man, been on a debate team or had dabbled in politics, or if I had been an adjunct lecturer someplace, forced to get up in front of an audience and communicate ideas, I would have gotten better and better at that at an earlier age. And that's, I think you're saying, what would I do differently? And that might be what it would be.
If you have an ambition to do something a bit differently, what does it call for that you are not already doing? And I don't believe it is the speaking ability. You have it already. So what is it?
Well, I'll use an example here that Stephane can resonate with, that all of my speaking ability or ability to negotiate or to influence, I tried to use that at the company where Stephane and I were working shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
And you know what? I couldn't do it. I couldn't influence anybody. Now, okay, Stephane, you may give me a free pass by saying, well, Jim, it wasn't your lack of ability. It was the receptiveness of the executive team there. But to your question, I think my thesis here is that I could have been more effective and a better speaker at a much earlier age, 10 years earlier than it actually, I developed these skills, out of necessity. You become, you're thrown into roles and you learn to adapt. But I wish I'd prepared better for that.
Yes.
I wish I'd come out of school, or I wish I'd come out of my first couple of assignments with a better presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, better presence. Yeah.
More persuasive earlier on.
Yeah.
I think where I ended up, I have no dissatisfaction where I've ended up. And I don't feel that, I don't think I did poorly. I hope you don't feel I'm saying that I've got some kind of disappointment.
No, it's the kind of from it's the last tiny bit of being on top level you're addressing. Are Steve Jobs excellent speaker? Is he a top excellent?
Steve Jobs was actually a mediocre speaker. So yes. I knew Steve Jobs. I worked with him shoulder to shoulder. He was a consultant at 3Com when I was there. And he worked with a small group of us personally for about 4 weeks. I found him to be an irritating, narcissistic, overblown, he's a terrible human being one-on-one. But like I said, he was a remarkable visionary and ability to identify markets and products and technologies and bring them together. But that didn't mean he was a good human being. I heard that as a speaker within Apple, he was considered not particularly charismatic.
No, exactly. That's also my impression.
Where he really shone, where his biggest public achievements as a speaker were at the the product rollouts. It was legendary, but he prepared for those for weeks. He had everything, and it was done kind of to his specs. But as a one-on-one influencer, he was terrible. Kid you not. And as a small group presenter, as the CEO of Apple, they said he was not all that compelling, or he did a lot of things by force. And I guess it was just the nature of his personality. So not everybody at the highest levels is influential, and not everybody that's influential gets to the highest levels. So
it might connect to the point you made earlier on, that how important it is to have a relevant partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for your students, Stephane, my gentle advice is you can't do anything alone, so form partnerships and networks. I mean, that's, how common sense is that? But
but
still,
people forget, so it's a relevant, good advice.
Well, when I was a young engineering student and thereafter a young MBA student, most of the style of teaching was a lecturer would get in front at a blackboard and they would say, here are some definitions, here's how these concepts relate, let's do some examples. And so it was very much teaching. The energy was from the teacher to the student. And nowadays in MBA school, I went and gave a guest lecture at University of Santa Clara, which is right down the road here, in their MBA program. And I realized after talking to some of the students that the energy is not from the student, from the teacher to the student. Students work in teams. Exactly. They work on projects. They don't listen, well, they do listen to some lectures, but it's lectures plus projects. And it forces them to collaborate.
Exactly.
Your grade is not how well you did on a test. Mm-hmm. It is a grade on how well did you work as a team.
Yeah.
And which is a huge change. And I could see it from one generation to the next.
It has changed over time.
It has changed enormously over time.
From individuals to more team-oriented.
Well, that's right. And also from the 1960s and 1970s, people spoke in terms of hierarchy. Yeah. That you had what they call line and staff. That there was a line from the executive to the director to the manager to the to the supervisor. There was a hierarchy. It was organized like the military. And people don't, at least not in Silicon Valley, they don't organize in hierarchies anymore. They organize in networks. They come together for projects, and they will work flexibly. The people don't work at cubes anymore. So I did some consulting at Facebook. They don't have cubes. You simply come in with your laptop and you plug in wherever you sit down, and people tend to work in collaborative environments. They have meeting rooms or collaborative space, and 90% of most of these, the office space is devoted to collaboration, small collaboration, large collaboration, but people's work styles are different. So for your students, Stephane, the encouragement that you do not work as an individual, you work as a group, you work as a team. Innovation happens with a passionate partner and some people with some good technological awareness. And so networks and strong
relationships
are more important than being a really excellent engineer working all by yourself.
But you are speaking totally into my mindset. That what you're saying supports exactly my focus area. It's nice to have a big brain and a clear brain and cognitive skills, but to be relevant in a relationship, you have to be aware of your emotions, your reactions, how you influence other people, how you are being influenced, in order to be relevant in working together with other people.
That's exactly right. That is wonderful.